Khaled Elgindy is a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute, and he joins me now live from Washington. Khaled, good to see you. Now, since the 7th of October, every time Secretary Blinken has visited the region, one of his main objectives has been to address the worsening humanitarian situation in Gaza. But the reality in Gaza tells us that the United States has largely failed in achieving that objective. More than 85% of the population within Gaza has been displaced due to Israel's bombing. And according to the United Nations, there is no precedent in modern history to the tragedy that we are seeing in Gaza right now. So tell me, does it perhaps indicate that the United States is helpless in the face of Israeli bombing? It has lost all its influence over Israel?
Well, it's not that the United States has lost its influence. The United States has a great deal of leverage. It's a question of whether and how they want to use that leverage. So far, the philosophy of the Biden administration from the moment they entered office, and certainly throughout this terrible war in Gaza, has been that any disagreements would be expressed privately and not publicly. That the only public displays would be of support and solidarity, and we've seen that certainly from this administration. The problem, of course, with that approach is that it has not worked. The private nudging and even urging by the Biden administration to limit civilian casualties, to do more to prevent civilian deaths, and to allow much more humanitarian assistance. Those have been heard by Israeli officials for 3 months now, but not acted on in any meaningful way. The amount of aid, according to the State Department, is still well below, far short of what is needed. And so the question that they're not asking themselves, apparently, is whether this approach is working. And it seems to the world, and certainly to Palestinians in Gaza, that it's not. I'm just not sure that the administration understands that.
So if they're not even asking whether or not their approach is working, it's likely that Secretary Blinken is not going to do anything different this time around. This is going to be his 4th visit to the region.
Right. I mean, I think what may be different is now that there is there's much more pressure for Israel to move toward this next phase of the war, which would involve a less intensive military bombardment, for example, of civilian areas, and much more targeted attacks. They expect that phase to begin soon, and so that may be part of the reason behind the timing of the secretary's visit. But that phase seems entirely up to Israel. Whether it's next week or the week after or a month from now, we don't know exactly when will it be. And it seems that the administration is content to allow Israel to dictate those terms, regardless, really, of the desperate situation on the ground.
What's your reading of the statement made by the defense minister of Israel, where he basically says that the military operations of Israel are going to intensify and continue in the southern part of the Gaza Strip?
Well, I would certainly take him at his word. I mean, the reality is bearing that out. We are seeing an intensification in Khan Yunis and Rafah and other parts of the south. So there's no question that when he says that, he probably means it. The question is, for how much longer will they be able to continue that intensification? So far, they've been able to dictate the terms almost entirely on their own, independent of the wishes of the United States. I think for Washington, they would very much like to see an end to this phase. They've been saying that now for several weeks. The Israelis have been reluctant. That may change, but again, the Washington is content to leave that decision in the hands of Israel.
You know, Khaled, the speculation among many experts is that Israel is conducting its military operation with the blessing of the United States. But it's interesting to see you say that Israel is acting on its own with its operation in Israel. And this could also perhaps indicate that it's only Israel alone which can end this assault on Gaza, not the United States.
Well, I don't mean to suggest that the United States doesn't have a role. Clearly, this operation could not have continued for as long as and as intensively as it has without the support of the United States. If the United States had not vetoed Security Council resolutions backing a ceasefire, this war would have ended many weeks ago. There's no question about that. But this administration is not there. They're not interested in a ceasefire. They are not talking about a ceasefire. They don't believe that a ceasefire is a good thing. They want this war to continue. They'd like it to continue in perhaps in a different direction, with less intensity, with fewer civilian casualties, with more humanitarian assistance. But in principle, the United States continues to back this war and has tactical disagreements with how Israel is conducting it, but is still prepared to defer ultimately to Israeli decision making.
Khaled Elgindy, thank you very much for talking to us here on TRT World. Really appreciate your taking out the time.